Welcome to Hidden Truths, where the world you think you know begins to unravel. Here, we don't just ask questions, we challenge the foundations. In today's episode, we're pulling back the curtain on something you walk through every single day. Walls, hallways, schools, offices, streets, malls. You thought they were built for function, for comfort, for convenience. But what if they weren't? What if the very architecture of your world was designed to mold your behavior, control your movement, and train you to obey without you ever realizing it? Today, we uncover the architecture of obedience, how physical space itself has become the quietest, most effective form of control. Because the greatest prisons don't need bars. They just need you to never question the door. The illusion of choice. Are you really free? You wake up, you go to work, you choose your route, your coffee, your lunch. You decide what to wear, where to sit, who to talk to. You think you're free because you get to choose. But is that freedom? Or is it simply the illusion of freedom? Because the truth is, you don't live in a world of your own making. You live in a system carefully constructed around you. Walls you didn't build, paths you didn't design, schedules you didn't create, and rules you never questioned because they were always there. From the moment you were born, your choices have been shaped, not by open fields of possibility, but by narrow corridors designed to guide you without force. Think about this. Before you even understood language, you were placed in a crib. 4 walls, 1 exit, a small space. You cried, you reached, you adapted. Then came preschool. Chairs in rows, bells to signal when you could move, stickers for good behavior, timeouts for disobedience. You thought you were learning math and language, but what you were really learning was how to obey structure, how to follow instructions, how to stay within invisible lines. And it never stopped. In adulthood, those chairs became cubicles, the bells became deadlines, the stickers became performance reviews, the timeouts became layoffs. The walls stayed the same. We're trained to live by systems, to value routine, to stay in our lanes, not because it's natural, but because it's familiar. You were never asked what freedom looks like. You were only taught what obedience feels like. Here's the disturbing part. Control doesn't always need chains. It doesn't always come with sirens, violence, or dictatorship. The most powerful form of control is one you mistake for comfort, for normalcy, for life. You choose your job from a list someone else created. You vote for candidates pre-approved by a system. You pay rent to live in boxes that look identical to your neighbors. You follow signs, crosswalks, schedules, routines, and think it's all your decision. But what if it's not? What if the walls around you were not built to protect you, but to condition you? What if your home, your school, your city were designed not for human thriving, but for human obedience? In the next chapter, we'll explore how architecture isn't just about structure, it's about behavior, and how something as simple as a hallway can silently teach you to follow without ever speaking a word. Because before you were told what to do, you were shown where to go. The hidden language of walls. Look around you, right now, wherever you are surrounded by shapes, by edges, by boundaries. But what if I told you, walls are not neutral? They speak, they instruct, they shape your behavior without needing a single word. Architecture is not just about shelter, it's about control. And nowhere is this more obvious than in the way walls are used to guide you. Think about a school hallway. Long, narrow, straight. There is one direction, forward. No curves, no choices. You walk where the walls tell you. You move when the bell tells you. And you learn, without ever being told, that freedom of movement is not yours to have. The same applies to office buildings. Glass walls that let you be seen, but not escape. Low cubicles that keep you exposed, but isolated. Conference rooms at the center, like altars to authority. Every inch of space says the same thing. You are here to be productive, not free. Hospitals, banks, government offices, prisons. They all share something eerie in common. Symmetry, silence, surveillance. You enter through one main door. You are funneled, weighted, processed. There are chairs, but only in lines. There are windows, but too high to see out. There is lighting, but cold and lifeless. And that's no accident. These spaces are not built for humans. They are built for order. And order in these structures always means obedience. Let's go deeper. Why do so many institutional spaces rely on right angles? Because curves are unpredictable. Curves allow for creativity, for linger, for pause. But straight lines, they move you quickly, efficiently, silently, from point A to point B without question. When you walk through an airport, you don't wander. You follow signs, you follow ropes, you follow the walls, designed to remove choice and replace it with flow. And the more you submit to flow, the less you remember how to choose. Even shopping malls, temples of modern consumption, are designed like mazes. No clocks, no natural light, just loops and paths that keep you moving, searching, spending. The longer you stay, the more you forget time, the more you forget that you walked in with a purpose and are now moving by design. The architecture doesn't just guide your feet, it hijacks your brain. And here's the most brilliant part. The system never has to say, obey. It only has to say, this is where you go. This is how it's built. This is how it's always been. And so we obey not because we are forced, but because the space we live in has trained us to. It's not just what's being built, it's what's being taught, silently, physically, repeatedly. Walls don't just hold us in, they hold us back. In the next part, we'll uncover the first place where this architecture of obedience truly begins, where control is disguised as education, and obedience is dressed up as learning. Welcome to the first factory, school. School as the first factory. Before you ever clocked into a job, before you ever stood in a voting booth, before you understood what power even meant, you were enrolled in the very first system designed to train you how to live inside a box. It was called school, but it could have just as easily been called the factory of compliance. Let's start with the physical layout. Rows of desks, a teacher at the front, a chalkboard, now a screen, projecting the truth. You sit, you face forward, you do not speak unless called upon. Sound familiar? It's not just similar to a factory, it is a factory. But instead of manufacturing goods, it manufactures behavior. Every part of school is a rehearsal for adult obedience. The bell rings, you move. You're given tasks, you complete them quietly. You're watched, graded, ranked. You raise your hand to ask permission for the most human needs, even to use the bathroom. You're not learning freedom. You're learning to wait, to comply, to perform for approval, to fear making mistakes. And they call it education. But education, in its truest form, should make you question. Instead, school makes you memorize. It rewards answers over curiosity, repetition over exploration, conformity over creativity. By the time you're a teenager, you've already been trained to believe that success means fitting in, not standing out. You've learned that silence is safety and disobedience is danger. Now consider the schedule. Why 8 a.m. to 3 p.m.? Why 5 days a week? Why short breaks and longer lectures? Because it mirrors the structure of the 9 to 5 workday. It prepares you not just academically, but psychologically for a lifetime of routine, deadlines, and supervision. It doesn't ask, what is this child passionate about? It asks, how do we get this child to fit into the mold, to fill the pipeline, to feed the machine? Even the grading system is a form of subtle behavioral control. It doesn't measure real intelligence, it measures obedience to expectation. Did you follow instructions? Did you write what was asked? Did you do it in time? Then you get an A. But if you question the premise, challenge the idea, color outside the lines, you're disruptive, you're underperforming, you're difficult. In reality, you might just be free. And the cost of this system? We raise generations who are brilliant at taking orders, but terrified of trusting themselves, who wait for permission to create, who ask, is this on the test? Instead of, is this true? You were told school is where you find your voice, but for many, it's where they learn to silence it. It's where creativity is replaced with conformity, where potential is measured in points, and where the architecture of the building, just like the system within it, tells you exactly where to sit, what to do, and how not to question it. In the next part, we'll explore what happens after you leave school, only to step into another box with tighter walls and smaller windows. Welcome to the modern workplace, the cubicle, the new cage. Cubicles and corridors, the corporate prison. You graduated. You thought you were finally free. No more bells, no more uniforms. You could choose your job, your office, your future. But when you walked into your first corporate building, you realized something chilling. You weren't free. You had simply moved from one system of control to another, from the school desk to the cubicle. Let's examine the layout. Rows upon rows of small square booths, each worker confined to a 4x4-foot space surrounded by thin walls, too low to give privacy, too high to allow real connection. You can't lie down, you can't stretch out, you can't shut the door because there is no door. It's not quite a prison cell, but it's close enough to make your soul shrink without you realizing it. You sit all day under fluorescent lights, every movement tracked by software, security cameras, key cards, every break scheduled, every minute monitored. And it's called a career. Now look at the corridors. Long, narrow, windowless, lined with doors that aren't yours. Lit just brightly enough to keep you alert, but dim enough to dull your imagination. There's no color, no warmth, no sense of ownership. You are there not to belong, but to perform. You move from cubicle to corridor to conference room to cafeteria, just like you once moved from classroom to hallway to lunchroom to gym. Same rhythm, same system, different building. Even the elevator has a message. You can only go where you're allowed. You can't press the top floor unless your badge permits it. You can't enter certain offices unless someone unlocks the door. You go up or down, but never out. And you learn that the higher you climb, the fewer people you see smiling. The open office trend promised collaboration, but in reality, it just removed the last barrier between you and constant visibility. Now, not only are you being watched, you're being watched watching others. You lower your voice, you avoid standing up too much, you wear your professional mask all day long, and by the time you leave, you're not tired because of work, you're tired because you've spent 8 hours being watched. Performance reviews, key performance indicators, quarterly goals. These aren't just business metrics, they're instruments of psychological pressure, because when productivity becomes identity, you no longer ask, is this right? You only ask, will this get me ahead? And what about the break room? It's a box with a microwave, a table, and a clock that reminds you you've got 11 minutes left. Even rest is measured. You're not relaxing, you're recharging, just enough to get back to producing. It's not humanity, it's machinery. And yet, because you get a paycheck, because you're not behind bars, you believe you're free. But the truth is, you've simply entered a prison of reward, not punishment. You trade hours for money. You trade dreams for deadlines. You trade freedom for the illusion of success. And the building applauds you for it. In the next part, we'll walk into another structure you enter willingly, happily, even excitedly, not knowing that it too was designed to train you. Welcome to the Cathedral of Consumption, the shopping mall. Shopping malls, the Cathedral of Consumption. Welcome to the temple, not of God, not of truth, but of desire. You step in not because you have to, but because you want to. That's the brilliance of it. This isn't a prison, it's a cathedral. A cathedral of consumption. Look around. There are no clocks, no windows, no exits in sight. Just lights, music, color, movement. It feels like freedom until you realize you're being guided. The mall isn't just a place, it's a system. A carefully engineered environment where everything is designed to influence your behavior. From the scent piped into the air, to the shine of the floors, to the looping layout that leads you in circles without you noticing. This is behavioral architecture at its peak. Consider the entrance. Most malls open into the biggest, brightest, most expensive stores. Luxury fashion, tech, jewelry. You're greeted not with options, but with aspiration. You're not meant to buy yet. You're meant to feel what you lack. Because once you feel lacking, you'll start searching. And the mall has just the thing to fill the void it quietly created. Now pay attention to the layout. There's no straight path, no direct line from entrance to exit. Instead, loops, zigzags, distractions at every turn. Stores are placed so you have to walk past temptation again and again. Impulse becomes inevitable. And because there are no clocks, you forget how long you've been wandering. Because there are no windows, you forget if it's day or night. Because everything smells like new, you forget what you came for. You came for one item, you leave with 6. You came to browse. You leave with a credit card bill. You came to escape stress. You leave with a dopamine high that fades as soon as you get home. And so you come back, again and again. The mall doesn't imprison you, it seduces you. Even the food court is strategic. The smells are overwhelming. They overlap, combine, confuse. You don't even know what you want. You just want something. Noise, people, trays, buzz. It mimics the chaos of need. And in that moment, a simple sandwich feels like survival. But it's not about the food. It's about keeping you in the system just a little longer. And here's the twist. You think you're the customer. You're not. You're the product. Your attention, your data, your money, your behavior, all harvested, tracked, sold, and predicted. This isn't shopping, it's training. You are being conditioned to associate spending with satisfaction, choice with happiness, buying with identity. And the mall is the altar where you offer up your autonomy. In the next part, we'll step outside the building and into the streets, because the control doesn't end when you leave the mall. The city itself has been designed not for your freedom, but for your obedience. City design, the obedient pedestrian. You step outside, out of the mall, out of the office, out of the system, right? Wrong. Because the city itself, the roads you walk on, the crosswalks you follow, the benches you sit on, the trains you ride, all of it is built on a quiet assumption that you must be managed, not served, not liberated, managed. City design isn't about freedom of movement, it's about directed movement. It doesn't ask, where would people like to go? It asks, how do we make people move where we want, quickly, safely, and without resistance? And the answer is architecture. Let's start with the sidewalk. Why is it narrow? Why is it fenced in? Why are there rails at intersections? To keep you in line, literally. You walk single file. You stop at red. You move at green. You wait for the beep. You stay in your lane, even if no cars are coming. Why? Because the environment trained you to. You don't ask why you're waiting. You just wait, like you were taught. Crosswalks. They exist not just for safety, but for behavioral programming. The moment you learn to walk, you are taught to fear the street, not because it's inherently dangerous, but because you must obey signs to survive. Stand here, walk there, don't run, look left, now go. It's a ritual of obedience, repeated every day until it becomes invisible. Now think about public benches. Once upon a time, they invited rest, conversation, community. Now, they're designed to discourage all three. Benches with metal bars dividing the seat. Benches too short to lie down on. Benches with spikes to deter the homeless. You're not meant to stay. You're meant to keep moving. To consume, not connect. To pass through, not gather. Even stillness is seen as a threat in a city built for movement. Public space is no longer about people, it's about flow. How many pedestrians per minute? How many vehicles per lane? How efficiently can bodies be moved from one zone to another? You're not walking in a city, you're moving through a machine. and you are one of its cogs. Even the parks, green spaces meant for leisure, are designed with subtle cues. Paths that curve gently to keep you moving. Benches far apart to prevent lingering groups. Limited shade to discourage long stays. Fountains with signs, "Do not touch." Lawns with signs, "Keep off the grass." The city says, "You may rest here, but only on our terms. You may relax, but not too long. You are welcome, as long as you behave." And public transport? It's freedom, right? Only on the surface. Look closer. Trains that run only on fixed routes. Schedules that dictate your hours. Turnstiles that measure entry. CCTV on every platform. Seats designed for solitude, not conversation. You move fast, but only where the system wants you to go. And if you want to go elsewhere, you're stuck, because the map is not drawn for the individual, it's drawn for the efficient herd. You see, the modern city is not chaotic, it's choreographed. You are not navigating it freely, you are being guided, subtly but powerfully, every step of the way. The streets shape your steps. The structures shape your silence. And the spaces between, those wide, empty voids, ensure that people never gather, never question, never connect long enough to change the system itself. In the next part, we expose the ultimate eye in the sky, a design not of walls or roads, but of watchfulness. Because once you can predict behavior, you don't need to force control. You only need to watch. Surveillance is architecture. You've followed the walls, you've obeyed the signs, you've walked the path laid out for you. But what made you do it? It wasn't force, it wasn't fear. It was something even more powerful. The feeling of being watched. Surveillance is not just a camera in the corner. It's a presence, a pressure, a reminder that someone, somewhere, might be seeing you right now. And once you believe that, you don't need to be forced to obey. You begin to police yourself. The French philosopher Michel Foucault described it best. He called it the panopticon, a circular prison, cells all facing inward, a single guard tower in the center. The genius? The prisoners never know when the guard is watching, so they assume he always is. And that assumption? It creates perfect obedience, not through violence, but through visibility. Now look around your world. Cameras in elevators, in lobbies, in buses, in classrooms, at traffic lights, above ATMs, in your workplace, in your child's school, in your pocket. They're no longer hidden, they're expected. They're part of the design. You see the camera sees you. And in that mutual gaze, you obey. But here's the twist. The goal isn't just to watch. It's to make you internalize the watcher. When you walk through a train station and notice a camera, you adjust your behavior, not because you're guilty, but because you've been trained. You fix your posture. You look less suspicious. You perform normalcy. Congratulations, you've become your own security guard. And it doesn't end with cameras. Modern surveillance is built into architecture in invisible ways. Mirrors in stores, so you see yourself and behave. Strategic lighting, so you can't hide in shadow. Open sightlines, so you're always within view. hallways that force eye contact, so you self-regulate, one-way glass in offices, so authority sees without being seen. The building is watching you, even if no one's behind the lens. And that is the true architecture of control. But the most powerful form of surveillance? You carry it, everywhere, willingly. Your phone. It knows where you are, what you searched, what you said, who you're with, what you paused to look at, what made you hesitate, what made you click. You feed it your behavior, and in return, it feeds you instructions. The surveillance is no longer top-down, it's inside-out. You're not just being watched, you're being shaped. And yet, you feel free, because the cameras don't threaten, the screens don't scold, the apps don't demand. They just suggest, they recommend, they personalize. And in the comfort of that convenience, you forget that every choice you make has already been predicted, modeled, and sometimes even decided for you. In the next part, we'll visit the darkest corners of design, spaces not meant to inspire or even contain, but to erase the individual altogether. Where silence is demanded, where movement is restricted, where freedom is no longer even a concept. Welcome to the corridors of hospitals, prisons, and the design of silence. Hospitals, prisons, and the design of silence. There are places in the world where voices go quiet, where footsteps echo like confessions, where movement is limited, whispers are sacred, and time feels suspended. Hospitals, prisons, mental institutions, nursing homes. They may seem unrelated, but they share a common blueprint: silence, stillness, submission. Let's start with the hospital. The walls are pale, the lighting is artificial, the corridors are long, clinical, sterile. Every surface reflects light, every sound is amplified, but every voice is subdued. Patients walk slowly, if at all. Staff speak in code. Visitors are told to hush. It's not just for medical reasons, it's architectural conditioning. You're being trained to enter a state of vulnerability. You do not belong to yourself in this space. You belong to the system, the forms, the diagnosis, the machines. Now enter a prison. Different context, same silence. Harsh lighting, minimal windows, echoing floors. Every hallway identical, every cell symmetrical. The goal is not just containment, it's erasure. Remove individuality, flatten emotion, strip identity down to number, location, and behavior. You're not allowed to raise your voice. You're not allowed to choose your clothes. You're not allowed to move without permission. The architecture ensures this before the guards ever lift a finger. And the mental institution? It's designed to look soft, but it's functionally identical. Locked doors, observation windows, hallways you can't wander from, chairs bolted to the ground, beds without corners, cameras in every corner. Here, silence isn't suggested, it's enforced. Even comfort is controlled, because comfort, unchecked, might encourage thinking, and thinking might lead to questions. Even nursing homes follow the script. The rooms are simple, the halls are monitored, the routines are strict. Elderly residents are lined up in wheelchairs, facing the same direction, fed at the same time, put to bed at the same hour. What began as care quietly transforms into containment. They are not asked what they want, only told what comes next. And the architecture ensures no escape, not just physically, but emotionally, spiritually, existentially. Across all these places, one truth repeats. Silence is not a side effect, it is the objective. The silence isn't just the absence of sound, it's the absence of power. Because a person who doesn't speak doesn't resist. A person who doesn't move freely doesn't rebel. A person who sits where they're told, sleeps when they're told, wears what they're told, eventually becomes what they're told. And the design does all the telling. The lighting strips away warmth. The furniture limits comfort. The colors mute emotion. The signage replaces decision. The layout enforces hierarchy. And the result? A human who stops feeling like one. But here's the most terrifying part. When you leave these places, you take the silence with you. You've learned not to speak too loudly, not to question authority, not to ask for too much, not to hope too boldly. And you wonder why the world feels numb. You've been taught, by buildings, to expect nothing more. In the next part, we uncover how design doesn't just restrict your body or your voice, it rewires your sense of time. Because once you can make someone wait, you can make them forget what they were waiting for. Welcome to the architecture of delay and dependence. The architecture of delay and dependence. You enter a government office. You take a number. You sit. You wait. You stare at the blinking screen. And nothing happens for 30, 45, 90 minutes. But you don't leave. You don't complain. You just wait. Why? Because the system taught you that waiting is normal. That delay is just part of life. That your time is less valuable than the authority behind the desk. Welcome to the architecture of delay. This isn't inefficiency, it's design. The longer you wait, the more you submit. You stop asking questions. You stop expecting respect. You shrink yourself to fit the role, a silent body waiting for permission. And the space is built to reinforce that role. Hard plastic chairs, fluorescent lighting, signs that say no food, no phone, no noise, screens with numbers that seem random, counters that rise above eye level, doors that you're not allowed to enter. You're not a guest, you are a subject. This system of waiting appears everywhere. Hospitals, embassies, banks, job interviews, DMVs, even tech support hotlines. It's not just about function, it's about positioning. They are in control, you are in need. They provide, you request. And the space, the room, the lighting, the seating, reminds you who holds the power. Now let's talk about dependence. Think about elevators. You stand, you do nothing. You wait for the machine to decide your destination. If it breaks, you're trapped. If it's slow, you're helpless. There's no exit until it says so. Dependence, disguised as convenience. And then there are automatic doors. You can't push them open. You have to wait for them to recognize you, to approve you. Even public transport teaches this. You wait for the bus. You wait for the train. You wait for the stop. You wait to be moved. Modern life is a series of dependencies, and they all happen inside structures. Here's a harder truth. When a society normalizes waiting, it discourages demanding. When you're used to delay, you forget that you could design your own timeline. And when the space is built to slow you down, you eventually stop speeding up. And what do you do while you wait? You scroll. You numb yourself. You fill the silence with noise. You're not present. You're not powerful. You're just stalled. Waiting has become a lifestyle, and the buildings around you, they've been optimized for your stillness. But there's another layer to dependence, the architecture of service. Have you noticed how many modern buildings remove the tools for self-sufficiency? There's no public restroom unless you ask. There's no water unless you buy. There's no power outlet unless you pay. You must constantly ask, pay, or qualify to meet basic human needs. You are made to feel grateful for what should be basic. In this system, you don't move freely. You don't rest freely. You don't even decide freely. You wait, you obey, you depend. And the space doesn't feel hostile. It feels official, professional, normal, which is exactly how control is supposed to feel. In the next part, we'll step inside your home, the one place you believe you're truly in charge. But are you? Because the apartment you live in might just be another cage in disguise. The apartment grid, the cage you chose. You call it home. You pay for it monthly. You decorate it. You sleep in it. You believe it's yours. But what if the place you call your safe space is just a softer prison? What if you didn't choose it, but were trained to accept it? Let's zoom out. Look at a modern apartment block. Rows and rows of identical boxes. Same height, same layout, same materials, same windows staring blankly into other windows. It's not a neighborhood. It's a grid. You don't live in a village. You live in a storage unit for humans. And you think it's freedom because you get to choose which box to live in. Step inside. A small kitchen, a narrow hallway, 1 or 2 rooms if you're lucky, all square, all functional, all designed to contain, not to expand. Everything is close. Everything is compressed. You're surrounded by walls, yet told to feel independent. You believe you're the owner of this space, but you can't change the floor. You can't tear down the wall. You can't extend the balcony. You don't even control your own plumbing. You don't own your home. Your home owns your behavior. And then there's the vertical living. The higher you go, the more detached you become from the ground, from the people, from nature. You leave your apartment through a narrow door, step into a hallway shared with strangers you don't speak to, wait for an elevator that may or may not work, exit through a lobby that isn't really yours, and pass a security desk that quietly reminds you you're being watched. This isn't living, it's logistics. You're not part of a community, you're part of a system. And what about sound? Thin walls mean you hear your neighbors, but never speak to them. The architecture makes you aware of others, but afraid of them. You learn to whisper, to walk softly, to turn your music down. You're not being friendly, you're being controlled by acoustics. And let's not forget the lease. You're paying thousands to live in a box you can't customize. You must ask permission to paint a wall. You need approval to hang a shelf. You can be evicted with 30 days' notice. But still, you call it freedom because it has a lock on the inside. But what is that lock keeping out? And more importantly, what is it keeping in?
Even the design of the furniture reinforces passivity. The couch faces the TV. The bed faces the wall. The desk faces a screen. Your body is arranged by the objects around you to sit, not move, to consume, not create, to scroll, not question. You say this is your space, but every square foot was built to make you still. Now consider this. The more time you spend inside your apartment, the more you accept that small equals enough. Your dreams shrink to match the dimensions of your living room. Your ambitions quiet down to match the thinness of your walls. Your social life collapses to your phone. Your rebellion is replaced by routine. And you call this adulthood. You call this responsibility. You call this life. But what if it's just another form of learned helplessness? You didn't design this. You were funneled into it. Because cities aren't built for people to thrive. They're built for people to fit. Your apartment isn't your reward. It's your reward for complying. You went to school. You got the job. You followed the rules. And in return, you get a quiet cage with your name on the lease. In the next part, we move beyond walls. Because even when you walk freely, even when you're outside, you're still not choosing your path. We'll explore how even transportation itself has been designed to keep you on track without ever letting you wander too far.
Transport routes. Move where you're allowed. You step outside your apartment. You head to the station. You board the train. You ride the bus. You follow the route. You arrive. It all feels simple, efficient, predictable. But here's the question. Who drew the map? Because once you realize you're only going where someone else decided you can go, you begin to see the tracks under your feet not as pathways, but as boundaries. Modern transportation is celebrated as freedom of movement, but in reality, it's pre-approved mobility. You don't choose the train's direction. You don't decide the bus route. You follow the arrows. You tap your card. You sit down. And you move, not by your will, but by the system's design. Let's take the subway. It's underground. There's no sunlight, no landmarks, no sense of orientation. You descend into a grid, a machine that moves you invisibly. No curves, no randomness, just straight lines and right angles leading you where you're allowed to go. Not where you want to go, not where you imagine going, only where the map permits. And if your destination isn't on the system, you don't go. Freedom or rail-bound obedience? Even walking has its lanes. Crosswalks, overpasses, underpasses, barriers that tell you exactly where your feet are welcome. Ever tried to cross a wide road where there's no marked path? The system punishes that. Not just with cars, with judgment, with signs, with the silent suggestion that stepping outside the lines is dangerous, irresponsible, wrong. You're not moving through a city. You're navigating a maze with invisible fences. And highways? They're monuments to efficiency and symbols of separation. They divide cities. They cut off neighborhoods. They tell you which areas are connected and which are forgotten. You can't walk across them. You can't live near them. You can only watch them carry others away, while you remain locked in by concrete walls. Airports, security zones, ticket zones, gate zones. You don't just move, you are processed, scanned, labeled, directed. Even if you've paid for the flight, you're not in control. From check-in to boarding to landing, you are a passenger in a system, not a person on a journey. And let's not forget the apps: ride-sharing, navigation, traffic prediction. They optimize your route. They tell you the fastest way. They tell you where to wait, where to walk, when to leave. But they never ask, where do you actually want to go? They assume, they direct, they automate. And in doing so, they slowly erase your ability to decide for yourself. You think you're mobile, but you're on tracks without walls. You're being moved like data in a network, routed, filtered, optimized. And you accept it because it's convenient, because it works, because it's better than chaos. But efficiency isn't freedom. It's compliance with speed. You move faster, but only in the directions allowed. And that's not mobility. That's containment, disguised as motion. In the next part, we slow everything down. We sit, not in motion, but in supposed rest. And we'll ask a quiet question. What happened to the spaces where people could just be? Welcome to the death of public stillness and the silent extinction of the bench. Public benches and the death of community. Once upon a time, a bench was simple, a piece of wood, a place to rest. It welcomed everyone, the elderly with their stories, children with their snacks, strangers who might become friends. But today, a bench is rarely just a bench. It's a message, a design with intent, a quiet tool of behavioral control. And if you pay attention, you'll realize that we are losing places to stop. Have you noticed? There are fewer benches in cities now, fewer spots to pause, fewer places where you can just sit without paying for a coffee. And when benches do exist, they're designed to be uncomfortable. They're made of cold steel. They're angled so you can't lie down. They're divided by bars so you can't sit too close to someone else. They tilt, slope, curve, not for aesthetics, but to make sure you don't linger. Why? Because lingering is no longer welcome. In the logic of modern cities, stillness is suspicious. You must move, consume, keep going. If you sit too long, you must be homeless. You must be loitering. You must be wasting time. So they design the city to make rest feel wrong. And this loss? It's not just physical, it's social. Benches were where people talked, where someone sat beside you and asked, "How's your day?" Where you watched the sunset, held your groceries, waited for a friend. They were portals to community, placed not just for function, but for connection. But the modern bench does the opposite. It says, "This is not your space. This is not your time. You may sit, but not for long. You may pause, but do not exist here." And then we wonder, why does the world feel colder? Why do we feel lonelier? Why do strangers avoid eye contact, even when they're only a few feet away? Because the architecture taught us to. Because we are living in cities that reward motion, but punish presence. That allow travel, but discourage gathering. That provide transit hubs, but erase meeting places. Even parks are designed for quick circulation. Jogging trails, bike paths, dog areas, playgrounds, all with flow in mind. But where are the wide, shaded spaces to just sit and talk? Where are the benches under trees, the communal tables, the spontaneous conversations? They've been replaced with design that maximizes movement,
and minimizes pause. And it's not just benches. Try finding a place to rest in a shopping mall without buying something. Try sitting down in a train station without being watched. Try occupying a corner of the city without feeling like you're in someone's way. We've built a world that forces motion and then pathologizes the desire to slow down. We see stillness not as peace, but as a problem. We removed the seats, and with them, we removed an entire layer of humanity. In the next part, we explore how architecture doesn't just shape where you sit, stand, or walk. It shapes how you think. We'll look at how every design decision, from the color of the walls to the height of a ceiling, is actually shaping your beliefs, your behavior, your brain. Because when they control the space, they begin to control the self. Behavioral architecture, designing the human mind. We like to think our thoughts are our own, that our choices come from within, that our behavior is shaped by belief, not by walls. But what if your thoughts, your habits, your energy, your motivation, even your mood were all being sculpted by the space around you? Because they are, and always have been. This is behavioral architecture, the invisible science of shaping human action not through words, not through force, but through space. Let's start small. Why do fast food restaurants use red and yellow? Because those colors increase appetite, because they stimulate urgency, because you're more likely to eat fast, eat more, and leave. Why do luxury stores use marble floors and dim lighting? Because they make you walk slowly, feel important, spend more. Why are casinos designed with no clocks, no windows, no straight paths? Because time disappears, and with it, your judgment. Architecture doesn't just hold behavior, it generates it. A ceiling that's too low makes you feel trapped. A corridor that's too long makes you feel small. An office with gray walls makes you feel dull. A schoolroom with rows makes you feel obedient. A space with mirrors makes you perform. The structure becomes the script. You act according to the scene you've been placed in. Now imagine your daily life. You wake up in a small square room. You walk down a narrow hallway. You commute in a box with wheels. You work in a box with glass. You shop in a box with lights. You eat in a box with branding. You exercise in a box with mirrors. You return to your box and sleep while holding another glowing box in your hand. Do you really think that doesn't shape who you are? We say we live in the information age, but we actually live in the architecture age. Because no information, no video, no lesson, no book will impact you more consistently than the space you inhabit every day. And if those spaces are designed to suppress movement, to isolate emotion, to reward stillness, to discourage gathering, to punish curiosity, then you will eventually become the kind of person who sits quietly, moves predictably, spends automatically, thinks cautiously, and questions nothing. It's not that the system took away your freedom. It never needed to. All it had to do was design a world where freedom felt unnecessary. You were never told to obey. You were simply placed inside a loop where obedience was the path of least resistance. And when that loop feels safe, familiar, convenient, you forget it's a loop at all. So the question isn't, why are people so passive? The question is, what kind of architecture raised them? Because if you raise a generation inside sterile boxes, under artificial lights,
trained to walk straight, to speak only when asked, to move only when scheduled, then you shouldn't be surprised when they grow up to follow orders, even if no one's giving any. In the next part, our final chapter, we break the fourth wall. We ask the one question this entire system is designed to keep you from asking. What if you walked out of the loop? What if you didn't wait for permission, but instead reached for the blueprint and drew something new? Let's talk about what it really means to be free. Break the blueprint. How to reclaim your mind. You've spent your whole life walking hallways built by others. You've sat in rooms arranged for compliance. You've followed signs, waited for permission, moved only where you were allowed. But now, you've seen the blueprint. You've seen how walls shape obedience, how silence is designed, how stillness is enforced, how even your thoughts have been carved by corridors. And the question remains, now that you know, what will you do? Because awareness is power, but power means nothing unless you act. And no, you don't need to burn buildings. You don't need to escape to the forest. You don't need to live off the grid. But you do need to start with this. Look around. Question everything. Ask, why is this space designed this way? Who benefits from this layout? What behavior is this environment rewarding? What is it quietly discouraging? And most importantly, what kind of person is this space trying to create? You may not be able to redesign your city overnight, but you can start by redesigning your habits within it. Don't always take the default route. Sit where you're not expected to. Pause where the system wants you to pass through. Speak in places meant for silence. Learn outside the classroom. Think outside the algorithm. Move not because you're told, but because you've chosen. These small acts of disobedience are the seeds of mental sovereignty. And inside your home, reclaim it. Put your chair where the light hits your face. Rearrange your desk to see the sky. Turn your bedroom from a recharge station into a sanctuary. Hang something on the wall that makes you question everything. Create a space that reflects not who you've been trained to be, but who you really are. Architecture wants to make you a product of the system, but you can make your space a product of your rebellion. Because true freedom isn't about removing walls. It's about remembering that you are allowed to open the door. Obedience isn't destroyed by rage. It's dissolved by awareness. And when enough people wake up, when enough people stop walking the same hallways without asking where they lead, the blueprint loses its power. You are not a cog. You are not a dot on a map. You are not a number in a queue. You are a human being, capable of creation, capable of resistance, capable of redesign. The world may have been built to keep you in line, but your mind, that's still yours. And today, you start drawing your own blueprint.